A 51-year-old guidance counselor from El Paso was sipping lukewarm coffee in seat 17 degrees Celsius when both pilots stopped responding to air traffic control, and the only voice that could still reach them came from her cell phone pressed against the cockpit door. American Airlines Flight 2473, an Airbus A321 with 154 souls aboard, cruised at 36,000 feet on the red-eye from Dallas to Phoenix. The desert night stretched black and endless below, dotted with the faint lights of ranches that looked like dying embers. In the cockpit, something invisible had gone wrong, and the woman the crew had barely noticed at boarding held the one fragile thread that might keep everyone alive. Before we go any further, drop a comment below. What state are you watching from? I read every single one. And if this is the kind of story you came here for, subscribe. There are more coming. Elena Vargas looked exactly like someone you'd pass in an airport without a second glance. Sensible black sneakers, a faded denim jacket, silver-streaked hair pulled into a practical bun. She carried a canvas bag stuffed with college recommendation letters she still needed to finish reviewing. Nobody on that flight suspected she once wore captain's bars on a different kind of aircraft. She settled into 17 degrees Celsius, apologizing softly to the college kid beside her for bumping his knee. "Long legs run in my family," she said with a tired smile. The kid nodded politely, already lost in his headphones. Elena's fingers found the worn leather bracelet on her wrist, a simple thing braided with a small metal wing charm her husband Miguel had given her on their last anniversary before the cancer took him. She rubbed it once, the way she always did when the altitude pressed on old memories, then leaned back as the plane climbed into the Texas night sky. On the surface she seemed calm, just another tired professional heading home. But inside, that familiar unease stirred, the one that never quite left her since she walked away from the cockpit 6 years ago. Elena had never planned to carry those skills into civilian life. After leaving the Air Force, she became a high school guidance counselor because she wanted to help kids steer clear of the kind of mistakes that cost lives. Yet the sky had other plans. She remembered the training hangar outside Tucson, the smell of hot tarmac and old coffee. Her mentor, Captain Luis Ramirez, a man who'd lost his only son in a training mishap years earlier, had taken her under his wing when no one else would. He taught her things most commercial pilots never touched, not because he had to, but because teaching her kept his son's memory alive, in the only way he knew how. One blistering afternoon during simulator training, the session went south fast. Dual hydraulic failure at low altitude. Elena had asked him, sweat dripping down her back, "When will I ever need to know this, Captain?" "This isn't combat." Luis had looked at her with those tired eyes and said, "The sky doesn't care what uniform you wear, Elena. It only asks if you're willing to stay when everyone else wants to run." One day, that knowledge might be the only thing between strangers and their families. A surprising thing most people don't realize about aviation emergencies. When both pilots are incapacitated, ground-based systems can sometimes provide basic vectors, but on certain Airbus models like this one, full manual reversion requires someone inside the cockpit who understands the fly-by-wire logic quirks. The automation can fight you if you don't know exactly how to talk to it. Elena had learned that the hard way in those sessions. She pushed the memory aside as the plane leveled off. Everything felt normal. For now, the flight hummed along under a clear night sky, the kind where stars feel close enough to touch. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus Hale and First Officer Sofia Mendez shared easy conversation, the comfortable rhythm of two professionals who'd flown together a dozen times. Marcus mentioned his daughter's soccer game he'd miss again. Sophia teased him about it while scanning the primary flight display. In the cabin, life unfolded in small human moments. Row 12 held a young mother traveling alone with her toddler, humming lullabies to keep him calm. In 25D, an elderly veteran in a faded marine cap stared out the window, counting the seconds between engine sounds the way he once counted artillery. And near Elena, the college kid quietly stressed about his upcoming finals, tapping his foot in an anxious rhythm. Elena noticed a faint, irregular vibration through her seat. Nothing dramatic, but wrong. She dismissed it at first, telling herself it was just fatigue playing tricks. Up front, everything still looked fine on the instruments. Not everything that looks fine is fine. The The first sign came quietly. A flight attendant knocked on the cockpit door for the routine check and received no answer. Then, ATC reported the transponder, blinking erratically. Inside, both pilots had been hit by a sudden severe case of food poisoning from a bad crew meal, something that happens more than passengers realize on long night legs. They were conscious but disoriented, unable to maintain control as the plane's autopilot began subtle corrections that wouldn't last. Elena felt it in her bones before the seatbelt sign illuminated. Her hands grew clammy. She knew that specific change in engine note. The moral weight pressed on her: stay quiet and hope the crew recovered, or risk everything by stepping forward. Revealing herself meant opening old wounds, the ones from the accident that made her quit flying. Staying silent might cost 154 lives. She weighed both paths in her mind, throat tight, thinking of her students back home who needed her steady presence. Stay with me here, because what happens in the next few minutes is the part nobody talks about. And once you hear it, you won't be able to forget it. I want you to think about what you would have done in her position. Hold on to that thought. She stood up. The flight attendant tried to guide her back gently. Ma'am, please. We have procedures. Elena spoke softly but firmly. I'm former Air Force. I flew C-130s and instructed on Airbus transitions. Let me talk to them. First Officer Mendez cracked the door, face pale. This isn't the time for passengers. Elena didn't argue. She named the exact alternate law procedures for this aircraft type when automation degrades, then demonstrated by correctly predicting the next ATC vector before it came through. When the captain inside groaned and slumped further, the skepticism cracked. The first officer finally let her closer. Elena clipped her leather bracelet to the door latch, the anchoring object now a quiet reminder of why she had to try. As she passed the young mother in row 12, the woman clutched her toddler tighter, eyes wide with fear. That single human detail, a child who might never see his father again, hit Elena harder than any altitude reading. Nobody fully believed her, until the demonstration. Gentle dismissal turned firm when she asked a question about the current bleed air configuration that exposed a gap in the first officer's exhausted thinking. Then the alternative, waiting for ground intervention, failed as comms started breaking up due to the aircraft's position over remote terrain. Captain Hale, fighting through nausea, made the call. "Help us," he whispered. Elena moved into the jump seat. The bracelet swayed as the plane dipped slightly, its meaning shifting from memory to purpose. She took the controls with hands that remembered too much. The yoke felt heavier than she expected, the cockpit lights too bright against the black desert outside. Her mentor's voice echoed, "The sky doesn't care what uniform you wear." Assessment was brutal. Altitude dropping slowly, both pilots now fully sidelined but stable. Resources, one experienced but rusty counselor, a terrified first officer, and a phone line to ground control that became their lifeline when cockpit comms glitched. Step by step, she talked them through. Maintain 250 knots indicated. Watch the flight mode annunciator. We need to request direct to the nearest suitable field. The first officer's voice steadied as Elena's calm instructions worked. The skeptic in the captain's seat fell quiet, then nodded faintly in trust. Mid-execution, a crisis within the crisis hit. An uncommanded roll from a sensor glitch not covered in standard dual incapacitation drills. Elena's technical knowledge faltered for a heartbeat. Then she reached across and simply placed her hand over the first officer's shaking one. "Breathe with me, Sophia. We're not flying this alone." That unexpected tenderness, two afraid women choosing connection, bought the seconds needed. She cross-checked manually, the human touch overriding the automation fight. The final approach stretched forever. Decision height came too fast over Phoenix Sky Harbor's lights. The prophetic line returned in her mind as the runway rushed up. The sky doesn't care, but sometimes it gives you the right person. Maximum doubt flooded her. What if her retirement had dulled instincts that kids' futures depended on? She whispered Miguel's name once. They landed imperfectly. Hard on the left gear, a slight veer corrected at the last moment. Tires smoked. The plane shuddered to a stop on the runway. Something went slightly wrong, a minor brake overheating. But they survived. Silence filled the cockpit. The desert night outside pressed against the windows, indifferent, yet witness. Elena's legs nearly gave out as she stepped back. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. She fought an absurd urge to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The first officer spoke first, voice cracking. "You stayed when you didn't have to." Captain Hale met her eyes with a look of raw reckoning. No words, just a slow salute from his seat. Passengers reacted in waves. The young mother wept openly, holding her toddler who slept through the worst. The veteran in 25D simply nodded at her as she passed, eyes shining with respect. Ground crew handled the aftermath with professional efficiency, but their gratitude showed in quiet handshakes. Luis Ramirez flew out the next day. They sat in a quiet corner of the airport chapel. Few words passed. He touched her bracelet and said simply, "Miguel would be proud. You carried more than you left behind." Weeks later, Elena was back in her El Paso office, listening to a teenager worry about college applications. Recognition came in quiet ways, a parent's thank you note, an unexpected school assembly mention, but it never fit the woman who still graded letters by hand. One afternoon she met Luis at the old Tucson hangar where training once happened. The air smelled the same. He looked at her and said, "That night didn't make you a hero, Elena. It just proved the person you became when no one was watching. I want you to sit with this. Did the sky choose Elena because she was ready? Or did refusing to run that night finally let her become the person the sky needed?" If this story moved you, I have more where this came from. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And leave a comment below telling me which moment in this story stayed with you. I genuinely want to know. The leather bracelet still rests on her desk now, wing charm catching the light, carrying every mile she never planned to fly again.